Picture this. You're in 1950s Italy, trying to squeeze your entire family into a car designed for four. The kids are literally sitting on laps, grandmother's holding groceries, and you still need to pick up cousin Marco from the train station. Most families just accepted this as reality. But Fiat's engineers looked at this daily chaos and asked a radical question. What if we could fit 6 adults in a car shorter than today's Mini Cooper? What they created was the 600 Multipla, a vehicle so bizarre-looking, so unconventional in its approach, that it would reshape how the entire world thought about family transportation. This wasn't just a small car with extra seats crammed in. This was a complete reimagining of automotive packaging that would inspire every minivan and people carrier that followed. But here's what makes this story extraordinary. The Multipla had just 633 cubic centimeters of displacement. That's smaller than many modern motorcycle engines. It produced only 52 horsepower, less than a riding lawnmower today. The entire car weighed 1,400 pounds, about half what a Honda Civic weighs now. And yet, this tiny machine could comfortably seat 6 full-grown adults with their luggage. Not squeeze them in for a short trip, actually seat them with dignity for a journey across Italy. To understand why the Multipla was revolutionary, we need to travel back to 1956 Turin. Post-war Italy was experiencing an economic miracle. Families were growing, cities were expanding, but most Italians couldn't afford large American-style cars. The narrow medieval streets of Italian cities couldn't accommodate them anyway. The standard Fiat 600, launched in 1955, was already a hit, an affordable two-door that put Italy on wheels. But families needed more. Fiat's chief designer, Dante Giacosa, had already proven himself a packaging genius with the original 600, but the Multipla project demanded something unprecedented. The brief was impossible. Create a 6-seater that used the existing 600's mechanical components, cost barely more to produce, and could still navigate Italy's ancient city centers. Oh, and it needed to fit in the same parking spaces as the regular 600. Giacosa's solution was radical. Instead of stretching the car longer, which would have made it unwieldy in tight spaces, he moved the entire driving position forward. Way forward. The driver sat directly over the front wheels, like in a delivery van, but in a passenger car format. This single decision freed up the entire length of the vehicle for passenger space. The engineering was ingenious. The 633cc 4-cylinder engine sat behind the rear axle, exactly like the standard 600. It was a water-cooled overhead valve design producing 21.5 horsepower at 4,600 RPM in standard tune. The Multipla version got a higher compression ratio, 7.5.1 instead of 7.1, and a larger carburetor, boosting output to 52 horsepower at 4,800 RPM. Torque peaked at 3.7 kg at 3,000 RPM. Not impressive numbers. Even then, but remember, this engine was designed to move a two-door economy car weighing 1,200 pounds. Now it had to haul 6 people. The transmission was a 4-speed manual with synchromesh on the top 3 gears. First gear was unsynchronized, common for the era, and required double clutching when downshifting. The gear ratios were carefully chosen for city driving. First gear was incredibly low at 3.85 to 7.1, allowing the tiny engine to get the loaded vehicle moving from a stop. Fourth was a modest 1,000.1, keeping engine revs high for what little power was available. The final drive ratio was 4.571.1, resulting in a top speed of just 85 kilometers per hour, about 53 miles per hour, when fully loaded. But speed wasn't the point. The Multipla's genius was in its packaging. At just 3,530 millimeters long, that's 138 inches, it was actually 15 centimeters shorter than the regular 600 sedan. Let that sink in. 6 seats in a car shorter than its 4-seat sibling. The width grew slightly to 1,450 millimeters, and the height increased to 1,605 millimeters, creating a distinctly vertical profile. The interior layout was revolutionary. 3 rows of seats, each holding 2 adults. The front row was a bench seat that could accommodate the driver and 1 passenger. The middle row was the masterpiece, a full bench seat accessed through rear hinged doors, what Americans called suicide doors. These doors opened against the airflow, which was actually safer at the Multipla's modest speeds because wind pressure kept them closed while driving. The rear row folded flat when not needed, creating a massive cargo area for a car this size. The suspension had to be completely reworked. The standard 600 used a simple independent front suspension with a transverse leaf spring. The Multipla kept this setup but strengthened every component. Spring rates increased by 40%. Shock absorbers were upgraded to heavy-duty units. The rear suspension used semi-elliptic leaf springs with telescopic dampers designed to handle the weight of 6 passengers plus luggage, potentially 450 kilograms of payload in a car that weighed just 635 kilograms empty. The braking system was entirely mechanical, no power assist, no hydraulics initially. 4 drum brakes with a total swept area of 116 square inches had to stop nearly a ton of loaded vehicle. The pedal effort was substantial, especially when fully loaded. Fiat recommended a following distance of at least 50 meters at top speed. Emergency stops from 50 kilometers per hour took nearly 20 meters, about 65 feet. Here's where it gets interesting. The Multipla's frontal area was actually 20% larger than the sedan's due to its height and width. The coefficient of drag was terrible, estimated at 0.45 compared to the sedan's 0.42. This meant the engine had to work harder just to maintain speed, but Fiat's engineers turned this disadvantage into a feature. The tall, upright seating position gave all passengers excellent visibility. The high roof meant even tall adults didn't feel cramped. The vertical sides maximized interior width. Production began in January 1956 at Fiat's Mirafiori plant in Turin. The first examples were actually built on the regular 600 production line with extensive hand finishing. Each body required 40% more welding than a standard 600. The complex door hinges alone added 12 minutes to assembly time. Initial production was just 15 units per day. The engine modifications for Multipla duty were subtle but critical. The cooling system got a larger radiator with 20% more surface area. The fan was upgraded from 4 to 6 blades. Oil capacity increased from 2.5 to 3.0 liters. The air cleaner was repositioned for better breathing. Even with these changes, sustained full-throttle driving in summer heat could cause overheating, especially when climbing mountain passes fully loaded. The Multipla's unique driving dynamics took adjustment. The forward driving position meant the front wheels were directly beneath the driver. There was zero front overhang. Hit a pothole, and you felt it immediately. The steering was incredibly direct, 2.7 turns lock to lock, but required constant small corrections. The turning radius was spectacular at just 4.5 meters, allowing U-turns in spaces where regular cars needed 3-point turns. Weight distribution was unlike anything else on the road. With just the driver aboard, 38% of the weight sat on the front axle, 62% on the rear. Fully loaded with 6 adults, this shifted to 45% front, 55% rear. The center of gravity was high, 610 millimeters off the ground, unloaded. Body roll in corners was pronounced. Fiat's test drivers recommended a maximum cornering speed of 25 kilometers per hour for passenger comfort. The suicide doors were an engineering challenge. The hinges had to be incredibly strong. Each door weighed 22 kilograms and provided access for 2 passengers. The latching mechanism used a double detent design. The first position held the door slightly open for ventilation. The second locked it fully closed. A safety interlock prevented the front doors from opening unless the rear doors were closed, avoiding the possibility of rear passengers being trapped. Fuel consumption was remarkable. Despite hauling 6 people, the Multipla achieved 7 liters per 100 kilometers in city driving, about 34 miles per gallon. Highway consumption, at a steady 70 kilometers per hour, dropped to 6 liters per 100 kilometers, 40 miles per gallon. The 27-liter fuel tank provided a range of nearly 400 kilometers. Compare that to American station wagons of the era that struggled to achieve 15 miles per gallon. The first major update came in 1960. The engine got a new cylinder head with larger valves, intake diameter grew from 26 to 29 millimeters, exhaust from 23 to 25.5 millimeters, compression ratio increased to 8.01, power output rose to 25 horsepower at 5,000 RPM in base tune, with the Multipla version producing 29 horsepower. This doesn't sound like much, but it represented a 15% improvement in power-to-weight ratio. Fiat also introduced hydraulic brakes in 1960, replacing the cable-operated system. The master cylinder was mounted under the floor, operated by a pendant pedal. Wheel cylinders were 27 millimeters in diameter at the front, 22 millimeters at the rear. Stopping distances improved by 30%. Pedal effort dropped by half. This single change transformed the Multipla from a vehicle that required planning to stop into something approaching modern drivability. The interior saw continuous refinement. Early models had simple tubular frames for the seats with minimal padding. By 1960, the seats featured proper spring suspension and shaped foam cushions. The middle row got armrests in 1961. A heating system, initially optional, became standard in 1962. It pulled air through a heat exchanger around the exhaust manifold, providing surprisingly effective cabin heating despite the rear engine layout. But the real innovation was in how people used the Multipla. Italian families discovered they could remove the middle row of seats entirely, creating a 4-passenger vehicle with enormous cargo capacity. The rear seats folded completely flat, forming a bed for camping. Small businesses used them as delivery vans during the week and family haulers on weekends. The Vatican bought a fleet for transporting groups of priests through Rome's narrow streets. The taxi version became legendary in Italian cities. The high roof meant passengers could enter and exit without ducking. The flat floor, no transmission tunnel, meant 3 passengers could sit comfortably in the middle row. Luggage for 6 fitted behind the rear seat. Taxi drivers loved the turning radius and visibility. Passengers appreciated being able to see out in all directions. The only complaint was the leisurely acceleration when fully loaded. Fiat built specialized versions for specific markets. The Maranello was a beach car with no doors at all, just canvas sides that rolled up. The seats were waterproof vinyl, the floor had drain plugs. It became the must-have vehicle for Italian beach resorts. The Familiare version added roof rails and a larger rear window. The commercial furgoncino replaced the rear windows with metal panels and removed all seats behind the driver. Production numbers tell the story. In 1956, Fiat built just 2,672 Multiplas. By 1960, annual production exceeded 20,000. Peak production came in 1964 with 27,445 units. Total production reached 163,750 when the last one rolled off the line in November 1969. But the influence extended far beyond sales numbers. The Multipla inspired Volkswagen's Type 2 microbus, which used the same forward control layout. Citroën studied it extensively before developing their AMI 6 brake. Ford's Thames 400e van borrowed the cab-forward concept. Even Japan's Subaru Sambar microvan followed the Multipla template. The DNA of this strange little Italian car spread globally. Racing teams discovered an unexpected use. The high roof provided space for spare tires and tools. The 6-seat capacity meant the entire pit crew could travel together. The tiny engine sipped fuel during transport between races. Several Formula Junior teams used Multiplas as support vehicles. Abarth even built a few hot-rodded versions with tuned engines producing 38 horsepower, enough to reach 110 kilometers per hour. The engineering challenges of the rear engine layout created unique solutions. Engine access required tilting the entire rear seat forward. Routine maintenance like oil changes needed special tools. The drain plug was nearly impossible to reach without a specific angled wrench Fiat provided. Valve adjustments required removing the engine cover panel inside the vehicle. Mechanics either loved or hated working on them. Cooling remained the Achilles heel throughout production. The engine compartment had minimal airflow. Summer traffic in cities like Rome or Naples could push coolant temperatures into the red zone. Owners learned to carry extra water. Some installed auxiliary electric fans. Others removed the engine cover panel entirely during summer months, accepting the noise for better cooling. The Multipla's crash safety was surprisingly good for its era. The forward driving position meant there was essentially a crumple zone ahead of the passengers, unusual for 1950s design. The rigid passenger cell with its multiple pillars provided decent protection in rollovers. The rear engine acted as a counterweight in frontal impacts, preventing the vehicle from rotating. Of course, by modern standards, safety was minimal. No seat belts, no padding, no collapsible steering column. Handling at the limit was entertaining. The rear weight bias meant oversteer was always waiting. Lift off the throttle mid-corner, and the tail would step out. The narrow tires, 120 SR12, had minimal grip. But the low power meant speeds were never high enough to be truly dangerous. The Multipla taught entire generations of Italian drivers about weight transfer and throttle control. The gearbox deserved special mention. The linkage from the floor-mounted shifter to the rear-mounted transmission used a complex series of rods and bell cranks. Adjustment was critical. When properly set up, shifts were precise, if not quick. When worn or misadjusted, finding gears became guesswork. The clutch was hydraulically operated, unusual for such a small car, but necessary given the long linkage run. By the mid-1960s, the Multipla faced competition from more modern designs. The Fiat 850 Familiare offered similar capacity with better performance. The new front-wheel drive Autobianchi Primula pointed to the future. Renault's 4 offered more practicality, but the Multipla soldiered on, its low price and proven reliability keeping it relevant. The final versions built in 1969 showed how far the design had evolved. The 766cc engine from the Fiat 850 produced 35 horsepower. Front disc brakes were standard. The interior featured proper ventilation and even a rudimentary defroster system. The suicide doors were replaced with conventional front-hinged units for the middle row. It was safer, more refined, but somehow less characterful. Today, surviving Multiplas are treasured by collectors. Values have skyrocketed. Pristine examples sell for over €40,000. The beach versions command even higher prices. Restoration is challenging. Body panels were specific to the Multipla and are now scarce. Mechanical parts are shared with the regular 600, keeping them mobile. Several specialist companies in Italy provide complete restorations. The Multipla's influence on automotive design cannot be overstated. It proved that intelligent packaging could overcome size limitations. It showed that families would accept unconventional styling for practical benefits. It demonstrated that low power wasn't a barrier to useful transportation. Every modern minivan, from the Chrysler Pacifica to the Honda Odyssey, owes something to this peculiar Italian box. But beyond the engineering, the Multipla represented something deeper. This was democratic transportation at its purest. It didn't matter if you were a construction worker with 5 kids or a small business owner needing a delivery van. The Multipla served all equally. It moved millions of Italians from poverty to prosperity, 6 at a time. It proved that clever engineering could solve real problems for real people. The contrast with modern vehicles is striking. Today's minivans weigh 4,500 pounds, have 300 horsepower, and struggle to achieve 25 miles per gallon. They're faster, safer, and infinitely more refined. But they've lost something the Multipla had: the purity of purpose, the elegance of simplicity, the democracy of basic transportation done brilliantly. Think about what Fiat achieved. In a car shorter than a modern Fiat 500, they fitted 6 adults. With an engine smaller than many motorcycles, they provided reliable family transportation. Using 1950s technology, no computers, no advanced materials, no CAD systems, they solved a packaging problem that still challenges engineers today. The Multipla wasn't just a car, it was a philosophy rendered in steel. The last Multipla rolled off the production line on November 15, 1969. No fanfare, no special edition, just the end of an era. By then, Fiat had moved on to more conventional designs. The market had shifted toward style over pure utility. But for 13 years, this strange little box had proven that engineering genius doesn't always need horsepower. Sometimes it just needs imagination. What fascinates me most about the Multipla story is the sheer audacity of the concept. Imagine walking into a Fiat board meeting in 1955 and proposing a 6-seat car with suicide doors, the driver sitting over the front axle, powered by a 633cc engine. You'd be laughed out of the room today. But Dante Giacosa didn't just propose it. He built it, refined it, and sold over 160,000 of them. The Multipla reminds us that innovation doesn't always mean more power, more technology, more complexity. Sometimes innovation means doing more with less. It means solving real problems for real people with elegant simplicity. In an age of 700 horsepower SUVs that never leave the pavement, there's something beautiful about a 52 horsepower box that actually improved millions of lives. That's the legacy of the Fiat 600 Multipla. Not its horsepower figures or acceleration times, but it's proof that brilliant engineering can transform ordinary lives. It showed that a car doesn't need to be fast to be revolutionary. It just needs to solve the right problem in the right way. And for Italy in the 1950s and 60s, this awkward-looking little box was exactly that. The right solution at the right time. What's your take on the Multipla? Would you trade power for this kind of ingenious packaging today? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear about any experiences with these incredible little people movers. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into automotive history, make sure to subscribe. We're just getting started exploring the weird, wonderful, and revolutionary machines that changed our world. Until next time, keep appreciating the engineering miracles hiding in plain sight.